Hello, and welcome to the second episode of Bridges and Silos with Dave Malinsky. This show, I want to bring people who I know who have done really interesting things and have combined elements of the world in unique and interesting ways. Our second guest is Laura Elizabeth Rice. Say hello, Laura.
Hello. Nice to catch up with you.
Same. So we've known each other for, I think, about 15 years, since like 2010.
Yeah, that spring.
Yeah. It was at a conference on medieval theater and anti-Semitism, wasn't there, or something like that?
It was the conference on the moment when Clifford's Tower, when all the Jewish people in the city were like rounded up and stuck in there, and then they lit it on fire, and it was horrific and appalling. And the conference was in memory of that.
Yeah.
And so we did a play that dealt with sort of anti-Semitic tropes in the Middle Ages as a commemoration.
Yeah. And that was honestly, that's one of my best memories. You are a medieval theater scholar.
Yes.
That's awesome.
I enjoy it.
Yeah. Just I'm I guess I a bit of a theater scholar too. I'm more interested in like the 18th century and the Age of Revolutions. But it's funny. At the college level, I covered more medieval history than anything else, only because it's what I knew the least about.
Mm.
But then that means, oh crap, I don't really know much about the Age of Revolutions beyond like a relatively basic level. I didn't really go deep on that, so I had to go with podcasts like Mike Duncan, and obviously reading. But it could have been, I guess, been good to have a university level course on it. I remember there was a Revolutionary America course that my school offered. I didn't take it because, like, well, I should go something I know nothing about. But what was your route to medieval theater?
Wow. My sort of story is just so weirdly, all these pieces just fit in like bits to a puzzle, like the whole way through. Just bizarrely. It's a weird narrative thing that I think about a lot. I guess my very beginnings to medieval anything, my mother brought home a copy of Alison Weir's The Princes in the Tower when I was in junior high.
Oh, wow.
And I read it, and it was the first time I was conscious of the Middle Ages as a thing. Because school didn't touch it at all. Like,
Oh, wow.
nothing in public school even acknowledged that it existed. So I went to university at a really small women's college, and I was really lucky because my very first, like, the advanced placement history class was run by the medieval professor in the history department. And I actually just wrote about this on our webpage. Wow, things come up in different ways. She had a class called Historian as Detective that was all about using and analyzing documents and then kind of teasing out what you could get out of them, but it was almost all medieval based. And I just kind of got hooked. But then I didn't think I was going down the medieval route. Lots of things happened in my life. I dropped out for a few years. I went back to university. And weirdly, I ended up with classes that were split between her class and the 20th century history professor. And I'm not a 20th century scholar, or I wasn't. Um, but I came out of it going, I really love both these things. Too bad you can't put them together. Yeah, life works in really mysterious ways.
Yeah.
Um, Ended up moving to England, did my master's in medieval archaeology because I love the idea of history through objects. I'm really a very sort of things, antique collector kind of person. But right away I discovered I'm not an archaeologist. My supervisor had done a lot with archaeology with medieval drama, of which, by the way, there's like not a lot.
Yeah.
And she knew that I was going to be a theater person, so she just kind of funneled me towards that with the understanding that I would let archaeology go because I wasn't real good at it. Got involved with Lords of Misrule at University of York and just kind of fell in love with it and decided to do the PhD on it, decided to do, my theater company was born out of that. And it just, yeah, one step in front of the other.
Wow. What do you think theater artists can learn from medieval theater?
I think there's some things that you can learn from any era of theater from the past, really, which is just There's kind of just there's the stories themselves, which
Mhm.
obviously talk about people from their time in a lot of cases, but also kind of their approach to things and how they view the world in terms of style. Like
Mm.
medieval drama is so different from today. We're all sort of, post Ibsen and
Yeah.
characters and subtext and all that. And the medieval period just doesn't really do that. It's very types. It's all in the UK particularly, it's almost all religious.
Mm.
Um, and that's just a big insight into sort of how they viewed things.
Mm.
But you can also look at things like the idea of, we're working currently on the War in Heaven or the Fall of Angels play. And so
Oh,
you've got somebody that everyone would know as like Bob the Tanner who suddenly is playing God. And
wow.
what would it mean for a medieval, just craftsman to all of a sudden be playing the deity? And how does he approach that? And what does the community respond to that? And, you know, how meta theatrical is it? How much are they supposed to believe he's God? Like all those kind of worldview questions can get teased out of it.
Okay, so we've both seen and took part in the York mystery plays, and what always impressed me about them, for those of you who don't know, the York mystery plays, and there were also, I believe, in Chester,
Uh,
another,
yep, there is a cycle from Chester,
yeah.
and there are two other cycles of biblical plays that we know exist, but we don't know if they were ever performed in cities, if they were performed as cycles. And we know that there was one in Coventry, but we only have one in a partial surviving bit from it.
So it's plays portraying the whole Bible from Genesis to Revelations,
Yep.
uh, and when I first saw them, I was like, "Wow, these are so earthy." God is an architect.
Yep.
That's That's wild. I think that's really cool. I'm not a religious guy in the slightest, but I think medieval Christian mystery plays are really cool. And
It's a
who?
perspective thing. It's totally
Yeah.
the perspective that they're coming from. It's so pre-Victorian. I think we're so post-Victorian that we forget that they didn't have all those sort of shibboleths about mixing up smut and, you've got the fart jokes, you've got the sex jokes. Maybe not in the biblical plays as much, but we do have medieval dramas that deal with that because they didn't have a problem with it like Victorians did.
Mm. Oh, so there were secular medieval dramas.
There were there's certain we assume there were in England, but we don't really have a lot of them surviving. There was actually literally 2 days ago
Oh,
an
wow.
article in the BBC about them potentially finding like fragments or reference to one in Beverly that I don't know anything else about. I just saw that and went, ooh. And they used a photograph from one of our shows. So
Oh,
that was why
nice.
we tweaked to it. But on the continent, I'm also working on a production of French farces right now from the Middle
Oh,
Ages.
cool.
And they have a massive canon, like hundreds of surviving texts that are pretty much completely secular.
Wow. But do you think the difference is because of the dissolution of the monasteries?
This is a question that I actually do not have an answer for and really would love to know more about. And
Yeah, that's fine.
it's
That's what it's all about. See, that's
it's
one of the
probably my language barrier, to be honest. I suspect
under
someone has
completely
worked on this,
understandable.
but yeah.
But I doubt many people in the audience will know anything about medieval plays at all. That's the thing.
Well,
We're like really in the weeds, and I love it. But
well,
let's.
it's worth I'll just say I don't actually think it probably has much to do with the dissolution
Okay.
because that killed off largely the Reformation killed off the mystery plays kind of slowly. I mean, they're still going into the beginning of the 17th century.
Right.
Shakespeare could have seen them. Um, that's kind of a subject for debate, but it's chronologically a possibility. Um, but the Reformation really, it was the religious drama that they had a problem with. So if there'd been secular drama, I don't know that we know how it would have fared.
Okay.
But I think there's something about the English character that just handled drama differently. And I don't know what it is, but I think it's a really fascinating question.
You said something about the English character.
Yes.
That fascinates me so much. So I've always had more of an attraction to English culture than anything else. Always, 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 always. And I think it's because of the emotional honesty and the focus on imagination and words in a way that I don't think American culture really does.
It's so interesting you say that about emotional honesty. My eyes literally like popped when you said that because I think the UK is so, I mean, as I've lived there, as I've
Mhm.
known it,
Yeah.
it's really not like it's that whole stiff upper lip. You don't show this stuff. Like
Oh,
I read a
sure.
book I read a book somewhere where like it was fiction, but the quote was something about, guys in England will never tell you that they love you. It's what they do.
Yeah.
And that's totally been my experience is we don't effuse in the same ways as Americans do. It's
Yeah.
it's much more just, in the subtext.
You're absolutely right, but that's what makes the art so interesting because they play with that idea. And
Yes.
this applies even to modern, like the most modern of stuff. Here's what I mean by that. Um, I'm a hardline gamer, hardcore gamer, but what that means is I love the art form as an art form.
Mm,
And something I've been recently been replaying is a game called War Groove 2. It's a strategy game. It's sprites, but it was by a British company, I believe, Chucklefish, and it has one of the best stories I've ever seen in a video game. Now, keep in mind, I haven't played games that are known for their story, like the Metal Gear Solids, the Zeldas, the Final Fantasies. But when I learned it's about like different armies fighting each other. In the first game, it's a pretty generic story, but the second one really delves into the characters and the world. And what really got to me was like the emotional honesty of the characters. There was like themes of abuse and manipulation, and like a gay love story between two kids. And I'm like, wow, of course this is by a British studio. It's so obvious. Whereas I don't know who else would do that. And obviously, then, but of course, it goes deeper than that. There's Watership Down, there's Plague Dogs. My point being, you keep talking. You talk about the English character, and well, firstly, is national character a thing? I guess it is a thing, but individuals and creatives interact with it in different ways. And it because of bringing the medieval and the modern, it happens throughout time.
like, yeah, is there a national character is such a good and probably timely in a political that we don't want to go down that road, but I think it's
I
a
don't mind if you
very
do.
valid. Yeah. It's a really real and very live question.
Hmm.
Um because obviously if we assume that it exists, and I do think there is a character. I'm not sure that I could put it onto paper, but there definitely is a sort of overall difference that you just kind of feel from
Yeah.
country to country. And I think that's true in every country I've been in, even though the UK and America are the only ones I've ever lived in.
Yeah.
But yeah, there is something to that. And obviously it's all the little cultural things and the behaviors that are expected and all of that kind of combined. I don't think it's set in stone though. I think it's quite plastic. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's where the discussion in modern politics gets lost is like there's this idea that it's preserved in amber probably around 1950 and we can
That's right.
never depart from that. And no, I mean, I think the British character is actually really quite flexible.
Mm.
And that's a thing that certainly the right wing in Britain is struggling with is the idea that we're actually way more bendable than they want it to be.
Yeah, yeah. Uh,
But yeah, the emotional question is such an interesting one. I don't know how to react to that as far as comparing the two because America has just never felt like my own skin ever. Even like as a tiny little kid who'd
yeah,
never set eyes on England, America just didn't feel right to me, and England
yeah.
very much does.
I completely
But
agree
I
with you.
can't, yeah, I can't exactly explain what it is, except I guess there's a reserve about British I will say
Mm,
the British character, you don't get in people's faces about politics and religion and all those things. It's not all about me just spaffing my opinion all over the world.
mm,
And, it's things like we don't have bumper stickers and billboards everywhere, just
yeah,
little things like that in the UK. Whereas over here,
yeah.
everybody gets to just be a microphone and a mouthpiece and a megaphone.
And a podcaster.
Yes.
um,
Let me know when you're a bumper sticker, because that would actually be kind of amazing.
well, maybe. Like I have some stuff on my YouTube channel as well. Um, but let's take the medieval angle. I'm sure
Yes.
you get this a lot. How is the medieval world different in reality from how we contemporary people imagine it?
I
And
suppose
that's
it
the
depends
big
on
question,
it's which contemporary people.
right?
Um, because anybody that does history at all, I think, is probably not completely out to lunch about medieval. It's
Yeah,
the people that look at medievalisms,
mm,
your fantasy people,
yeah,
the people that love Tolkien and all the sort of Dungeons and Dragonsy things that I think
yeah.
some of them, I don't want to just throw them under the bus and say those people don't know history, because some of them I'm absolutely sure do. But
Hmm.
you do get the odd one. I'm like, I literally had somebody once say, "Oh, you're studying the Middle Ages. Is that like castles and dragons and knights and stuff?" And
Wow,
I just went,
wow.
yeah, my jaw kind of dropped, because that was just like, you're maybe in the same universe, but you're
Mm,
definitely not in the neighborhood.
mhm.
So I think it really does depend on how much you're relying on things that are styled to look medieval, quote
Yeah.
unquote, versus anybody that actually has any interest in history.
Mm. So it's fine. I took all these medieval courses, and I'm kind of in the soup, but I can't really pick out the chunks of soup. Because like apparently, like the Dark Ages and the Renaissance both weren't a thing. Early, middle, late Middle Ages. But I guess because I'm such a modernist at heart, I always think about states, and those weren't even that much of a thing in the medieval period. Or is that an overcompensation? So the idea of the state as we modern people understand it, to what extent did that even exist in the medieval world?
Ooh, that's a tough question.
And I know it's
Um,
kind of outside your wheelhouse.
it is very much. So to anybody that listens to this that actually knows these things, if I
Right.
get this wrong, I am so sorry.
Hey, I get it.
My guess is that it probably was a heck of a lot more like, I think there's kind of a tendency to say, oh well, the ordinary people, the whole hoi polloi wouldn't have any idea what's happening, and I actually think that's wrong. I suspect people
Oh,
were pretty aware of what was happening in civic life. I mean, certainly if you're in an urban space like York,
right.
they've got, like, their council is regulating everything,
Oh,
and national law is regulating stuff. So it is actually relatively present.
mm,
And even if you're in a smaller area, and I'm just talking about England, I can't speak to
sure.
continental very well, but even if you're in a small area, you've got somebody that's government. Like, you
Right.
do have some concept of government, I think. Whether
Yeah.
or not you see yourself as English in a sort of chest thumping, flag waving kind of sense, you might
Mm,
not, but I don't think that people were actually divorced from the idea of state and government. I think it definitely existed.
okay. All right. Uh, so feudalism, was that a thing, or was it more of a localized thing that wasn't really a system anyway?
It's a system, manifests in different ways in different countries. So
Okay.
you'll have a more prevalent, quote unquote, feudal system as we picture it in some places than others, and
Yeah.
it disappears at a different rate in different places. But
Okay.
yeah, I doubt there were many people that didn't have some idea of what you're allowed to do and what you're not, and what the law says, whether the
Mm,
law is, the guy who manages the land that I live on, or whether it's, I know that
mm,
the king is doing something. I don't think many people are going to be totally divorced from that.
yeah. I I have so many thoughts about the medieval world now. It's, I guess, become a bit more interesting. But I keep coming back to the fact that books are hard to make
Mm,
because now we're all focused on literacy, and now that's probably starting to die and replaced with something else, which is interesting but also very dangerous. But books were hard to find in the medieval world. That's kind of like everything comes down from that, doesn't it? Because how else does collective learning happen? Oh yeah, theater. Yeah, but you have to,
Oh,
you need sheets of paper for the lines.
culture.
Mm,
It's so much more oral culture, and it's so
right.
much more memorizing. Like when you think about the fact that, the Iliad and the Odyssey, Beowulf, these are all things that people memorized in the original. They weren't on paper. This was stuff that people learned and handed down verbally. So, and I also think that there's probably somewhat more access to literacy than the stereotype says. Like
Sure.
in looking at the French farces, the
Mm,
number of people in medieval France that had at least some degree of literacy is higher than I think the stereotype would have you believe. I'm not saying they've got a library at home,
yeah.
but you're not, it's still a rare thing. It's not everybody's got it, but it's also not like just the absolute top echelons. Depending on where you are in the Middle Ages, let's remember the Middle Ages is like,
Sure.
many hundred years. It's huge. I can't speak to the early Middle Ages at all.
Mm,
I know nothing about it. I'm a very late medievalist,
gotcha.
but by the time I'm looking at it, certainly you've got, there's going to have to be some literacy, because if you're in a guild in a
Yeah.
city, you've got records, you've got stuff to do. Like, you're not completely in the weeds with the idea of words. But
Mm,
yeah, oral culture. So much of it is oral.
wow. And it's so funny. Oral culture is as much a quote unquote Western thing as anything else, isn't it? Like, I hate the term
Mhm.
Western anyway. It's overused. It doesn't really make any sense. Samuel Huntington. Ugh.
And I suppose it makes a little more sense in a colonial stroke post-colonial dominance kind of world.
Hmm.
But I think when you get sort of pre that,
Hmm.
if we're pre-printing press,
Yeah.
probably everywhere in the world is going to have more of an oral tradition. And like
Right.
looking at some like native
Hmm.
peoples across the world, they didn't lose it. They kept it
Yeah.
way past the Middle Ages. So yeah, I'm not sure that, I think looking at it as something that's kind of bracketed might be a Western idea of it, because we forget that people
Hmm.
still had it later. But I
Yeah.
think probably everywhere, like, well, I won't even say probably, initially in the human framework, everybody had oral culture.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. And I think that's probably what print culture killed. Maybe that's maybe a bit too far, but and
I
the
don't think it is. I mean, could you memorize the Iliad and recite it tomorrow? It's
no.
we've changed one set of skills for a different set of skills.
Well, see, that's what makes history so fascinating. It's not. It's less about a rise and fall of human, less about rises and falls generally than changes in focuses.
Yeah, because rise and fall is a value judgment. It's
Bingo.
yeah,
Yes.
it's completely just everything is changed. That's
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And how many people just think in terms of value judgments?
A
That's,
lot.
but
Probably
okay, it's
more.
a value
Yeah.
judgment itself. So can't escape it. But yeah, like from value judgment to description, I
Mm.
think that's a useful, I want to say area of growth, but maybe that's also, again, the thing itself. Do you
Yeah,
have
but
any
I mean,
questions?
we could parse about semantics in the tiny little micro till the end
Yeah,
of time.
yeah, yeah. Do you have any questions for me?
Oh God, so many, really, when I think about it. Like, your interest in history is so different than mine, both in terms of era. You tend to look at a lot of the eras that are my sort of black spots.
Hmm.
Um, but also you have such a philosophically based approach to kind of everything,
Which is
which,
weird because I never studied philosophy.
but it just seems to be where you're just natural. I think everybody has kind of a path that they just inherently
Yeah.
track towards. It's just something in us. Maybe it's in our raising. I don't know, nature, nurture, whatever. But yeah, it's so different than the way I look at things, because I'm not a philosophy. I'm not a theorist at all. I'm so like, what's the practicality on the ground? And
which I respect a lot. I think that there's a
but
philosophy to that too.
but like where do you think that comes from? And
That's
how do you think
a
that changes approaching history if you're looking at it from sort of that wider framework standpoint?
wider frameworks. Well, I guess I should talk about my history with history. I only really got into it in middle school um, with Age of Empires 2, Age of Kings. That's the medieval strategy game that everyone.
Mm,
But the medieval period, it just never spoke to me. The Age of Revolutions, the late 18th or 19th centuries spoke to me. Not and even then, you say philosophical, and you're probably right, but for me, it was never ideological. Like, oh, the liberation of maybe it was the liberation of humanity, but it was more
mm.
okay. There are all these cool new ideas. What about the people who don't subscribe to them? And that's generally my interest in loyalists in the American War of Independence and Revolution, because it brings back the transatlantic angle, which is, well, if these ideas are so good, if this old system is so oppressive, why would people follow it? And it was really Mike Duncan, the podcast, who was working from other academics, who was saying all systems have life cycles. Now, what the heck does that mean?
Well, I suppose
There's
things play out at some point where it's just time for something different. But
yeah,
I'm so fascinated by that sort of question about looking at things from the perspective of those who don't subscribe to the new ideas.
yeah.
And yeah, that's just such an interesting question, I think, to ask.
Whereas people like, oh yeah, writing the waves of history, and like I get that, and I definitely believe in doing that. But how do you deal with those who don't?
Mm,
And that's why, like, my favorite historical figures are guys like Nikita Khrushchev and Emperor Franz Joseph on one side of Austria-Hungary, who lived from 1848 to 1916. And so he lived through those changes. And then Khrushchev, who was like, okay, what can we do with Marxism and Leninism now that Stalin's dead? And compare that to Mao. And look, my favorite historical figure is Talleyrand, who was Napoleon's foreign minister. And he was around in all these different regimes. And sometimes he supported them, sometimes he opposed them. So that's my idea of riding the waves of history. It's like,
but
okay, what's going
here's
on?
my question coming out of that, though, is
Yeah.
how much do you think motive matters? Because obviously there's a difference between somebody who genuinely believes this system is good for people, this system is good for my country, or whatever, like but beyond themselves, they genuinely feel that people benefit from a certain system, as opposed to the people that say, I like this system because it's benefiting me and screw
Yeah.
the rest of you. Because I think that I personally think motive matters a huge amount up to a point, but up to a point it doesn't, because if the outcome is harmful, even if your intentions were good, the harm is still done. And I mean, I think that works out.
What was that last phrase? The harm is still done.
The harm is still done,
The harm is
even
still
if
done.
your intentions were good.
Oh,
So I think that's where motive. There's a point where motive makes a difference, but
hmm.
I think there's a point past which it doesn't, and that can be obviously on a personal level, but also I think on a historical.
Hmm.
Why would you support something? Who's benefiting from it? Is it you? Is it the other guy? Like, I think those are kind of interesting things to tease out of that, maybe.
Yeah. Well, and I say that I am fascinated by the people who quote unquote stand against the tides of history. But then again, I despise reactionaries with a passion that burns with the fire of 1,000 suns. People like Charles X of France, like Nicholas II and Alexander III, the czars, like Empress Dowager Cixi, those who say, no, we're going to retrain the old system out of a sheer lack of imagination.
Oh,
And
and
that
that's another motive, not a good one necessarily, but
is
yeah,
not.
sometimes inertia is motive.
Whereas, like a reformer, that I find extremely fascinating from
Mm.
either direction. So Louis Philippe in the French case, and Clement Attlee, man, Clement Attlee. It's everyone focuses on Churchill, but like we both know because we lived in York in Northern England, where the Labour Party is much stronger. Whereas, of course, in our country, Labor Party, destroy them. It's like, you gotta learn about that guy. He's not someone people talk about. Or even that Robert Owen, the guy who coined the term socialist, spoke to Congress. That Karl Marx was in communication with Abraham Lincoln. And the fact that socialism was just another faction in Britain, whereas in America, it's like, no, we have God. And anything outside that, send the secret police, which we don't have. The FBI is not a secret police. And meanwhile, here's why I try. So, like, a lot of people who lived under, communist regimes, they don't get why American leftists exist. And I get it. But that's because leftists were never in power in the United States.
Yeah, they're hard to find, like genuine left, as opposed to sort of center left or well, obviously left versus liberal.
Right.
But genuine like leftists in America are hard to find.
I mean,
and certainly they're not represented in a functional sense in the electoral process.
Yeah,
it's such a marginalized group.
They're mainly in academia and the arts, which is where you explore ideas anyway. But our culture, American culture, is not really about exploring ideas.
No.
I think that's why, like, we were much more comfortable in Britain than in the United States.
Well, I'm going to blame my ancestors. Puritans were not about the thinking.
Nope. They're like, no, the thinking's in the book already.
Yeah.
And that's why I call that stuff dead imagination. Worshipping choices that were made millennia ago, rather than we are in the world we are in. Let's see what that means. But on the other hand, that would have only be possible in a world of change. And I would guess, and feel free to push back me on this, when people think medieval, they think stasis and not change.
They think it? I'm not sure that I necessarily think they're correct. I think it's just a different rate of change and a different visibility of change. You look at, and they've got fracture moments. Look at things like the plague and how much that seriously upended in their recovery process. Your population is just tanked. Your workers now have a heck of a lot more value because there's so many fewer of them. Change is happening all the time. It's just a matter of how much does the record show it, and is it, it's not on your TV news every night. It's not on your smartphone every day.
The town criers are a thing, right? I know there's barber surgeons. There were barber surgeons up until the 1700s, apparently.
Oh yeah, absolutely. They are still around and kicking.
How do you get information? Well, your local priest, right? The trader, the local lord.
There's probably pretty good information networks, just as far as like word of mouth.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily know like the civic mechanisms, but things like with the mystery plays, I'll kind of circle back to that.
Yeah.
There is like an official proclamation of, in so many weeks we're going to have the mystery plays, so all the guilds prepare to bring forth your pageants, and that's a thing that is called out in the streets, and there's an event to have that declaration made. And it wouldn't surprise me if there are similar other declarations that get made in a civic space.
Right. I mean, theater is civic, has been at least since the Dionysia in Athens, and probably before that.
Well, I suppose it's a bit like everything is politics, everything is civics.
Yes, basically. The theater kid angle. And of course, there are people who loathe theater kids, and I'm sure the loathing is mutual.
That's fine.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, I mean, I wasn't a theater kid in the usual sense because my school didn't really do theater very much.
Right.
My theater kidness was in community theater with the adults, and we were like the only kids. So that sort of theater kid ethos just didn't exist where I grew up. But you were either the smart kids, or you were the sports kids, or you were the outcast kids. Like, those were your three menu options, and that was it.
So what's funny is the sports kids, that seems like controlled opposition.
Yeah, well, it's probably I'm probably not describing it in a fair binary when I look back on it because you've obviously got a lot of crossover between high achievement academically and high achievement with sports.
Sure, yeah, but again, I'm speaking as an outsider here, but in an environment that's supposed to be about learning, and yet it's the people who value physical activity who get a lot of social support, but there's also, yeah, but you have to deal with the man, but maybe that's just a dumb me grafting something onto, only because high school is a social structure and it was itself a product of time. The history of education is absolutely fascinating. And
Mm.
it's not necessarily about the increase in human freedom, maybe. Like that's where things get interesting. That's where I think a lot of ideas break down. Sure, you've got Paulo Freire on one side, that was the pedagogy of the oppressed, but then you've got guys like John Taylor Gatto, who was like, yeah, of course school's oppressive. Oh, but the church is fine. And that
I
almost is a
think
medieval question.
I suppose there's always been
Mm,
clickiness and in groups and out groups
mm,
depending on as adults, as teenagers. I think that's probably always existed.
yeah.
Just to give sort of an interesting example, we're representing the Tanners Guild in York,
Ooh,
and they were quite a lucrative. It's a hugely lucrative profession. Everybody's got to have leather. All your shoes
yeah,
are leather. Your horse harnesses. So much stuff is leather.
right.
But even though they were fairly well off, compared to some other groups,
Yeah.
they were not ever like they didn't get very far in the politics of the city of York,
Huh.
in large part because there's a stigma attached to working in a craft that makes everything stink.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it's sort of an interesting, like, okay, you're in, but you're not in kind
Yeah.
of thing that I was just reading about that kind of went, oh, that's interesting that we have that sort of social ostracism among
Mm,
adults in
yeah.
medieval crafts.
But what what
So,
what what were the popular guilds?
um, I couldn't tell you as securely because I wasn't reading about them, but
Yeah.
the merchant adventurers have always done well.
Yeah.
The goldsmiths,
Mm,
it's a bling kind of thing.
yeah.
Um, and the tanners were always in contention with the couriers guild, and they kind of went back and forth for primacy because they were both working with the same material.
Right.
So yeah, there's definitely sort of hierarchies in every bit of society, I suppose, and people are
Sure.
tribal and
Yeah.
all of that stuff.
So,
So I can't just blame American high schools, even though in my experience they suck.
right. So from for an outsider, what's the difference between a tanner and a courier?
So a courier. Sorry, I misspoke. Not the couriers, the cordwainers. That was my
Cordwainers.
misspeak. Yes, couriers also work with leather, but the cordwainers are the shoemakers,
Oh, yeah.
and they want to be able to inspect all the leather and have control over, quality control. And the tanner's like, nope, that's our business. And so they kind of fight back and forth through the city council to see who's going to get to be in charge of quality controlling things and looking at each other's wares. And cordwainers definitely beat out the tanners as far as like social hierarchy goes.
Ah, medieval cities as places where guilds fight it out, whereas I guess in the countryside, it's all food production.
Presumably.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know very much about rural medieval
Mm,
because you just obviously drama. You've got to have
yeah.
people to do drama. You don't see it
Right.
as much.
Yeah.
So
To what extent, and I say this as someone who has no familiarity with them at all, to what extent were church functions theater, irrespective of religious plays?
as in would they be perceived as theater or do they actually cross that divide between performance and worship? Because there's a different answer for each of of those
I
questions.
can give both answers.
Perceptively, I don't know that we would be able to know because that's probably going to be a person by person assessment.
Sure.
Certainly culturally, I don't think they would have seen it as theater.
Mm,
probably ever. If it's in the church, it's worship. But
ah,
if you go back to the earlier medieval, like the very sort of embryonic,
yeah.
I'm wading into some really debatable
Oh,
historic
sure.
waters here.
Hey,
So I'll put
oh
it.
gosh, yeah. The academic mind, like I can't get anything wrong, and like, yeah, that's
No,
important.
it's well, there's a big asterisk after this. So
Sure.
for a fairly large chunk of medieval drama academia, there was this assumption, understanding, belief that drama came out of the churches. It started with things like Easter celebrations and sort of a sort of little enacted scene
Mm.
in the church to do with Easter and the resurrection. And then over time it moved out. And I think that is now not really in favor as a linear
Oh,
progression. Now we're more on the idea of, well, there would have been folk drama. We don't necessarily have the records of it, but that they could have run parallel and they didn't necessarily have anything to do with each other. So the
right.
idea that drama inherently arose from the church, I don't think that is still in favor as a
Oh, wow.
theory. But there was a very long time where that was the belief, was religion gave rise to drama, and I think that's pretty much not in favor at present. So
Wow. Well, when did that shift happen?
probably when medieval drama as a study really took off in the latter half of the 20th century. Over
Oh,
time,
okay.
you kind of, medieval drama existed in that sort of Victorian, antiquarian,
Right.
that's when the scripts finally get editions that are accessible to people.
Right.
But really studying it post dates the 1951 big revival boom. And you really, because that's also when University of Bristol has the first theater department in the UK. So theater
Oh.
research altogether and theater as academics takes off at the same time as you get the revival of the mystery plays. So they're
Oh.
kind of congruent and they just accelerated and really kind of hit velocity in the mid to late 70s
Mm.
and up through the 80s. That was just really cooking on gas, and here we are now.
Wow. Well, I, I'm going to get you completely outside your comfort zone here. I don't apologize for it though. Um, so medieval drama becomes big in the early 50s. Do you know what else becomes big in the early 50s? Rail preservation. Thinking about rail preservation of like going to it's this was a big thing in Wales, but it was all over the country. Like a railway line that was going to close, and people said,
Mm.
"No, let's run it anyway." And I got to think this revived interest in medieval drama is probably part of the same spirit of keeping older systems alive, not out of reaction, but out of this is something people did. Let's keep it alive just by doing it.
Well, I can tell you medieval drama is really coming out of the Festival of Britain event. And a
Oh,
lot of that, so it's post, we're talking post-war. Britain is
yeah,
still rationed and miserable and unhappy
right.
with life.
Yeah.
So the government decides we're going to have a big festival, get everybody excited about being British again, and try
Mm,
to remind people that someday it won't be this crap.
mm.
So they decided to have this big festival in London that was incredibly modernist, really, really heavy on the futurism, future looking, new
Oh,
architectural styles, looking at all of that. But then they asked all the country to, like, all throughout, the UK, do something in your municipality to celebrate the festival so that you make this a national event. And
oh,
then they chose several cities to be like official festival cities, and they got money to put on something really big.
oh,
And the
wow.
interesting thing is that most of the writing about the Festival of Britain and the history on it talks about the London events, building that place that's down on the South Bank, where the festival was mostly
Oh,
held,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and all of the stylistics that came out of it, the architecture that came out of it. But when you go out of London, so many of the places that chose to do things decided to either, You get kind of a split. You get that we don't have a lot of money and we were going to build a bus shelter anyway or clear away this bomb site. So
Yeah.
now we're going to do that, but we're going to call it a festival event. We'll slap the label on it so we get credit for doing it.
Uh-huh.
But the other thing is places that actually chose to do things almost entirely did nostalgia. That's where
Mm.
you're getting the York Mystery Plays. Chester did a revival of theirs. There's a revival, like an entire medieval festival in Dunster.
Mm.
There's some plays in London. There's some plays in Derbyshire. Like they really, you get all this big boom of let's revive medieval plays because, hey, it's part of our history. And the country wanted it to be a heritage festival, even though the organizers wanted it to be let's look at Britain's future. So there's really
Interesting.
this push and pull going on in the UK between the future and the past as
Wow.
a dynamic. And that might, I don't know how that would have affected the rails, but I could completely see there being a similar conversation about do
Yeah.
we build a new line that we need that's going to help our economy, or do we bring back this old one that's maybe dying out because nostalgia? It wouldn't
Or
surprise me if they'd had
also,
the same.
so a big thing with British rail people is the nationalization and the Beeching report, but that wasn't until the 60s,
Okay.
where all those old lines, it's like, we don't need all these railway lines. They shouldn't have been built in the first place. They were part of the 1840s railway boom. They just need to be roads, roadification, carification. And it wasn't as bad in Britain as in the United States, but it's still a part of it.
Well, I hate to say it, as a dedicated driver
Yeah.
and someone who loves to see off the beaten path
Mm,
buildings
sure.
historically, as much as I can appreciate a good train, I really want to be able to just rock up on my schedule and get right to the front door.
Hey, fair enough. Hey, to each their own. To each their own.
But I also, unlike you, I did not grow up in an area with public transit. So
Well,
the idea
yeah,
that that's a normal thing.
I grew up on Long Island, and then I moved upstate. I only was in New York City since I was 7. Um, but yeah, public transit is amazing, and the people who knock it, they probably never had it. But
Well,
that was a
I
product.
don't think it shouldn't be an either or. We need better
Exactly.
public transit. Yes, we need to have the availability to get places in vehicles, but we also really need public transit because like
Yeah.
it's situational. When I
Sure.
leave my house in York to go into town, if my bus came round the clock, didn't cut
Yeah.
off early and was more reliable, I
Yeah.
wouldn't take my car into town. It's
Right.
too far to walk or bike,
Yeah.
or for me at least.
Sure.
But I would take the bus if it worked,
Yeah.
but it
And like,
doesn't work.
isn't public transit the most sensible jobs program you could ever do?
Oh
Because
God,
it's an
yeah.
inelastic need. All right. Well, it's getting close to 3 p.m. your time.
No, we're
The
only at 2. We're only at 2 o'clock.
we can go in on a bit longer. Great.
Yep.
Um, but I do want to keep these to roughly an hour. But I definitely love to talk to you again if you have more questions for me. So I'll explain to those people viewing. York, England, is 2 hours north of London, and it is a medieval city, very medieval focused, very focused on Vikings, on the Norse. And it's has it become much too Harry Potterified, or has that kind of waned?
It's backed off a little bit. I don't think we have 3 shops on the same street anymore. I think it's down to
Okay.
maybe 2, but yeah, there's no longer a queue literally going out the end of the street.
Oh, good.
Yeah, that was really annoying.
Yeah, I bet. I bet. Um, the shambles. Uh, um, but it's still a big tourist destination, irrespective of any Harry. But it always was, wasn't it?
It is, but it's changed how the touristing happens. And that's
Uh-huh.
the frustrating thing about life in York is it's become very like hen and stag do's and party central.
Oh
And
yeah.
that wasn't like that when I moved there. It was still very like your family vacation to see the historic buildings. And now it's let's go to York and get drunk.
I definitely did see some of that. How's the theater scene over there currently?
It's contracted somewhat from where it was pre-COVID. Like we really
Mm,
had a ton of particularly like little independent companies kind of like mine
yeah.
in those years. I mean we went to the theater like twice a week back then.
Oh,
And there were productions all the time. So I think
mm,
it's contracted somewhat, but it's still punching well above its weight for a
uh,
relatively small city. We've got Theatre Royal, we've got the Grand Opera House, we've got the two big ones, we've got the theater out Micklegate,
right.
41.
Oh,
There's not as many venues, but you still have little companies that pop up and do things. They've got some really really good community theater, like high quality
cool.
professional grade community theater companies. So, yeah, it's a much better town than it should be based on population when it comes to theater.
That's great, and it's like my theater preferences as well as my beer preferences were really formed when I was in York because it was so small and intimate and location based. And whereas the New York, I mean, obviously it's the beating heart of everything, but it's the beating heart of everything, and there's
Yeah,
pros and cons to that.
yeah, I can see that. Although I really need to get out to New York one of these days. It's been far too long since I've been there.
Oh yeah.
I would just guzzle theater like an addict.
Broadway is very pricey. Fortunately, there's plenty of things other than Broadway. Unfortunately, that is also pricey.
Yeah, it's New
But
York. It's gonna
yeah, it's
be.
New York. Everything's more expensive here.
I'm
Yeah.
from DC. I'm used to things costing a lot.
When was the last time you were in DC?
Oh yeah, before I moved to York. It's been 20
Ah,
years. I have not been back in since forever. And obviously, right now, I would probably not go back.
oh no. I guess I won't ask where you are now. Um,
I am in very snowy northern Michigan.
oh, I guess you could just drive. Cool. Oh gosh, you need snow plows and chains on your tires, right?
No chains. They're actually not legal because they
Oh,
wreck the roads.
oh
But
yeah, yeah, yeah.
the snow plows, oh yeah. The weekend before last, there were 4 feet of snow. It was a blizzard.
Wow,
It sucked.
yeah. Um, that's how it was in upstate New York too. I guess
What
it's
part of
similar.
upstate New York were you in?
Uh, the town is called Clinton. It was near Utica, so it's
Okay.
like a bit north of Albany,
Yep.
in between Albany and Syracuse, basically.
Okay. My mom's dad was from the Finger Lakes,
Oh
Ithaca
yeah,
area, so I've been out there
yeah.
a couple
There's
times.
more to New York State than just city. I've always really liked upstate New York. But maybe it's because I was a kid then.
Well, you missed out on one of the great glories of Upper New York State, which is the wineries.
Oh, really?
Yes. Yes,
Wow.
some very good, particularly like Niagara region.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. Adirondacks and all that.
Yeah. There are some nice wineries up there. I'm a city girl. I've never been a like bucolic kind of, but pretty scenery and good wine.
Yeah. I always thought I was more of a city kid too. But then when I'm in the country, I'm like, oh wait, this is actually nice.
I like
You know,
the city to visit. I like the country to visit, but I
hmm,
wouldn't want to live there. Is
that
always my take on it.
that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Okay, Lauren. Well, thank you very much. This has been a great conversation. I'm sure I'll have you on again.
You're very
Thank.
welcome. Happy to talk anytime.
Same here. Thank you for connecting medieval world theater and transatlantic cultural understandings. Have
And I
a
promise to let you know if I ever manage to connect medieval drama and trains. That day hasn't come yet, but you never know.
maybe like wagons they're connected and like all those teams of horses or something, or those plateways from mines, but those are probably later. Yeah, but anyway, thank you so much, Laura. Have a lovely rest
You're
of your
very
day.
welcome. Have a good day. Bye.
Peace. Bye.